For NY Up and Syracuse.com, I am Matt Parrino, joined as always by Ryan Talbot. And we are in the final weeks in the lead up to the NFL draft. Buffalo Bills sitting at number 9 currently. Will they trade up? Will they trade down? Will they stay at 9? We don't know. But if they do stay at 9, there's plenty of options on the table for them. Where are they going to go? And we're going to spend some time over the next couple weeks going over some of the top targets at that spot based on a lot of the mock drafts and expert big boards that are out on the internet. And Ryan, we're going to start with, I think, potentially your favorite target in Ed Oliver, defensive tackle from Houston. You've had him mocked to the Bills, for a while now. Before we get too deep into this, just off the bat, what do you really like about Ed, and how do you feel like he's such a fit for the Bills?
Well, one, right from the get-go, Brendan Beane has said, we're going to take the best player available. And, you keep seeing these mock drafts where Ed Oliver's falling to 12, 14, all these things. And I just don't see a scenario where that happens. If the Bills are sitting there at 9, if they don't trade the pick or trade back, how they would pass on him. Because this is a guy that I'll admit maybe doesn't have the prototypical size of a defensive tackle. Maybe that's a concern. Maybe the arm length is a concern. But this is a guy that was just an absolute game wrecker at Houston, taking on two linemen at a time, was a force against the run, was a force against the pass. Just seems like that kind of player that Sean McDermott would love to add to his defense. You look at what the Bills have done this offseason. They've added across the board on offense, but they've done really little across the defensive line other than re-signing Jordan Phillips to a one-year deal. So there's still that need to add another defensive tackle in there. And while this is a very deep draft class of defensive tackle, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better player than Ed Oliver.
Mm-hmm. Right off the top, I think there's a few things that you really like about this pick. If you're a Bills fan or, the Bills front office or Sean McDermott, you mentioned Sean McDermott, going back to that video at Ed Oliver's Pro Day, Sean looked pretty hype about watching him work out. And, this is a position of need for the Bills. Kyle Williams retired. You're going to lose, a big piece of production off of that defensive line. And I think with Ed Oliver, he's the type of guy, I really like the fact that he would step in immediately and become arguably your best defensive lineman. The kind of pressure that he can create. Obviously, Jerry Hughes at 31, still going to probably be that elite guy on the line. But I think Oliver presents so many problems and mismatches. I mean, you start digging a little bit and you read about him. Some teams are having him work out at linebacker. I mean, the endless possibilities with a creative mind like Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier on that defensive side of the ball. I feel like there's so many possibilities for what you can do with an Ed Oliver.
Oh, without a doubt. Versatility, like you said. There's things that you can do with that Oliver. You could drop him back. You could play him line him up in unique different ways, and like the key word, versatility. That's something that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane seem to really value. I think that's one reason that Ed Oliver just makes so much sense for the Bills. It's the reason that you see some of the players that get mocked to the Bills in these mock drafts, like Oliver, like Rashawn Gary, because of the versatility. It just makes a lot of sense there. In round 1, pick 9, there's a lot of different routes that they can go, but Oliver just makes so much sense. The only way I could see them passing on Ed Oliver is just because of how deep this draft class is.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when we were starting to put together some of the guys that we were going to talk about on this series. One thing that pops to me a little bit about Oliver is that I think might be a little bit of a red flag with the Bills is maybe a lackadaisical kind of personality. It doesn't seem like he's absolutely 100% in love with football. Maybe now I have not spoken to him about this, so I can't say for sure. But you just look about back in the day, 8th grade, 9th grade starting to play football, he was going to do it because his brother was doing it, and all of a sudden he became so good at it. You could tell that it's so natural for him. But you question, one thing that you mentioned what Brandon Beane said, liking the versatility and like being able to plug him in multiple positions. I think I've also heard Brandon Beane talk about the fact that they want guys that love ball, right? That are going to get in a locker room, galvanize some other guys in the locker room, and really just come to try to get better every day. Now, that might be Ed Oliver. I don't think I've spent enough time around him to really understand the entire makeup there, but just something to keep in the back of your mind because, there's a couple guys at this position. You look at Clemson's Christian Wilkins, and it seems like a guy that really is passionate about the game from everything I've read. So I think it's just something to keep in mind. But Ed Oliver, for all intents and purposes, is a guy that was going to be a top 3 pick 2-3 months ago, and now, like you said, out of the top 10. If he's there at 9, it almost seems like a slam dunk.
Yeah, I agree. Unless that they fall in love with the T.J. Hawkinson at tight end, or they look and they say, listen, this year's edge rushers, that's a pretty weak crop after the top 3, top 4. Maybe they target Burns there. Maybe they target Sweat there. Because, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of other targets at defensive tackle. That's the only thing where I could say that's why the Bills didn't take Ed Oliver if he was available. Round 2, Jeffrey Simmons could fall to number 40. He's the guy that was talked about as a top 5 pick. Definitely some red flags there, though, coming off of an ACL injury. Jerry Tillery out of Notre Dame, Kalen Saunders, pre-draft visitor, a guy that loves football, a guy that stayed at the Senior Bowl while his fiance went into labor with their child. He talked about how he wanted to make sure that this was a cause and effect. He said something along the lines of, I'm going to be a father now, and staying at the Senior Bowl could raise my draft stock, and that's money that's going to go towards my family, go towards my daughter. So definitely a guy that loves football, as you mentioned. Gerald Willis out of Miami, Daniel Wise out of Kansas. So these are guys that you could get rounds 2, 3, 4 that could come in and push for a starting job right out of the gate. That's how strong this draft class is at defensive tackle. But as we've said, Ed Oliver is kind of in his own echelon compared to these guys. He's not quite the Quinnen Williams type level of defensive tackle, but I would place him ahead of Rashawn Gary and some of these other guys that you're seeing mocked in the first half of the 2019 NFL draft. He is a special player. He brings a lot of talent to the table, and with that versatility, I can see the Bills using him in creative ways.
Definitely. Ryan, Ed Oliver, our first in a line of a few guys that we're going to talk about. Give Ryan a follow at Ryan Talbot Bills on Twitter. I'm at Matt Parrino for all your Buffalo Bills content. As always, guys, keep it locked on the NY Up and Syracuse.com.